Hi guys, it's Ross here from ecopet.ie. I just wanted to do the first in hopefully what is a series of short videos on the most common questions I get asked through the site. And I could have guessed within three guesses that the first question was going to be which is the best dog food for my dog. Um, this is a topic which I could probably talk for at least an hour on, and still probably not get through it all. You have so many different types of feeding now: fresh feeding, raw feeding, commercially prepared, homemade foods, and kibble. So today I'm just going to really briefly focus on kibble, the different types of kibble, and which ones might be the best for your dog, or how to try and figure out which is the best for your dog. So there are two main forms of kibble, extruded and cold pressed. Extruded foods are what you would typically know as dry dog food biscuits that have been commercially available for over 60 years now. Um, Extruded kibble is basically put into a very large vat, um, put under immense pressure at very high temperatures, and a nozzle at the end of the machine. It pops out nuggets of biscuits, and depending on the shape of the disc at the end of that machine, you can get all sorts of different shapes and sizes. That's why we get little novelty bone shapes, round biscuits, square biscuits, triangular biscuits. Um, as I said, extrusion generally uses very high temperatures. With many companies, it's in excess of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the problems with extruded dog foods is when they're cooked at those temperatures, it can destroy the nutrients in the food. So you can have a food that looks really good on the label, a really good ingredient list, high meat content, but then somebody has treated it at incredibly high temperatures for quite a long time. And it really can take away from the food. I've noticed over the last kind of 15 years, from first bringing in grain-free dog food into Ireland, that you'd see these amazing ingredient lists and very similar ingredient lists across different brands of foods. But you would notice very different results from one brand to another. And it took me years to figure out that the reason for that is the manufacturing process. So, although a lot of people are very aware now of what to look for in their dog food, there's not a lot of people that realize you need to look at how that food is being made. Um, I was talking to a friend about this recently, and I think she summed it up really well. And she said you wouldn't boil a pizza. Not to say that pizzas are particularly nutritious, but you definitely wouldn't boil one. It would kind of ruin it. So that's kind of just a couple of the points on extruded food. Um, Generally speaking, what I would say to people is start asking uh, companies what their cooking temperature is for their food. I have noticed after examining loads of different dog foods and finding out what temperatures they're cooked at, there are certain things you can look for. So biscuits that are very dark and dense, and quite earthy smelling, they tend to be cooked at colder temperatures. They're extruded at lower temperatures. Biscuits that are very light and fluffy and quite pale in color, they tend to be extruded at higher temperatures. That's not a strict rule, it's just a commonality that I've seen while looking at them. The other thing is if you place a handful of your kibble into a glass or a jar of lukewarm water, the more they swell up, uh, that also seems to be an indicator of the temperature that they're cooked at. The more they swell up, the more water they absorb. It tends to be a commonality again that those biscuits are cooked at a higher temperature. Um, so the rustic dog food company food that is manufactured at approximately 110 degrees Celsius. Um, and I'm really convinced that that's what makes it so much better than other foods with a similar ingredient list. And even some foods that have a higher meat content, people are really focused sometimes on, the difference between 60% meat and 80% meat. but 80% meat when it's incinerated is not much use, whereas 60% cooked at a really nice low temperature, that makes a big difference. The other thing that has come to light while I've been doing a lot of research on cooking temperatures. Now, this hasn't been scientifically studied. I wish I had the facilities to do a study like that. I don't. So this bit is very much kind of my opinion on it. But I've spoken to a lot of people about it, and they've agreed that the science has been done in other areas of cooking temperatures that would say that this is true, even though it hasn't been specifically studied with dog food. As many people, many of you will be aware, that cooking meat is the one thing people seem to know, that if you cook meat at very high temperatures, it can form carcinogens. And I remember there was warnings years ago, every summer when people started lighting their barbecue, uh, to remind people that, you know, very heavily charred meat was unhealthy because it started to form carcinogens. It would actually change the structure of meat and cause carcinogens to form. Now, what I wasn't aware of until recently is that that is just as true for carbohydrates that are overcooked. You can also get carcinogens forming at high temperatures. So again, although this hasn't been scientifically studied, I think it will be. I think somebody will pick up on this over the next few years and probably do some genuine research on it. But the scientific fact is that cooking at high temperatures does cause carcinogens, so I don't see why we should not assume that dog foods cooked at very high temperatures could be forming carcinogens in the food. There's an awful lot of dogs out there. That's something that's bothered me for years. There's an awful lot of dogs out there that do get cancer, and it never really added up as much to me with, you know, dogs don't smoke, they don't drink alcohol, they tend to get a lot of exercise, they do all the things we're told to do to lead healthy lives. Yet a huge number of them end up with cancer. I'm not saying that this will cure cancer in dogs, but I would imagine it will lessen the amount of dogs that get cancer, and certainly it's such an easy thing to avoid through a bit of research, that why not just eliminate that as a risk, and simply find a food that's cooked at a lower temperature. That was what led me a couple of years ago to seek out a cold pressed food, and that's the second type of kibble that people probably are not familiar with. Cold pressed food, it kind of looks like a rabbit pellet, or a pelleted horse feed. It doesn't look like your traditional dog biscuit at all. Uh, we researched a lot of different manufacturers when it came to getting a cold pressed food that we wanted to stock, and we spent a year trialing different foods. We had to get them imported from all over the world, and we went through. I think we probably went through somewhere between 6 and 8 different cold pressed foods before we settled on the Belfer one. And something that a few people, when they first bought the food, have remarked upon with the Belfers is it has kind of a dusty appearance to it. And when you get to the bottom of your bag, there's often like a fistful of they're crumbs, but some people were referring to it as dust. It does look a bit dusty, but it's crumbs, and that is simply because the food's not overly processed. A lot of the other cold pressed foods that we checked out had quite a shiny appearance, and the biscuits were much harder. They were much harder to break into, and they took slightly longer to break down in the jar of water test. So I think if you're looking at cold pressed foods, try and avoid ones that have a very shiny appearance to them. Um, with cold pressed foods, I'm not totally against foods that contain grain. I just want to put that out there. We do sell foods that contain grain. I certainly, my preference is grain free foods. But with cold pressed, I would say to people, don't use a cold pressed food that contains grain, because the two grains that are commonly in these dog foods are corn and rice, and they need to be cooked properly in order to become in any way digestible for a dog and for them to gain any nutritional benefit from them. So I would definitely avoid a cold pressed food with grain. If you're going to do that, try and find a good quality extruded food. and go that way. Um, when you're looking at cold pressed foods, the other thing is generally the cold pressing process is under 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's usually the maximum temperature that's um, happens when the steam, basically when you compress it, it gets hot, and there's some steam released. Usually that doesn't go over 80 degrees. With Belford, they could guarantee us that none of the ingredients that were used in the food were ever subjected to temperatures greater than, I think, was 60 degrees that they could guarantee us. With a lot of other manufacturers, they couldn't. So there was every chance that the meat meal that they were using in the food, or the potato meal, or peas, carrots, apples, all of those ingredients, they couldn't guarantee what temperatures they had been treated at beforehand. So that was something else. We thought, why pay the extra money and the extra hassle of sourcing a cold pressed food if you can't guarantee that all the ingredients have been treated at a low temperature and helped keep all those nutrients intact. Um, I'm a big fan of the cold pressed food. We've only had it kind of for 3 years now, but I've been really impressed with it. We've had great success with it, really good feedback, very little to no negative feedback on it. One or two dogs that just the cold pressed food doesn't agree with them. You're always going to get that when you're selling hundreds of bags of dog food. There's always going to be, a dog that it doesn't agree with. That's just part and parcel of it. As so many people will say, there is no one best dog food. The best dog food is the one that agrees with your dog and that you get the results from. I can tell you what our best selling food is and what I have found the best, but really it's about what's best for your dog, whether that's fresh feeding, raw feeding, high quality tinned food, or a kibble based diet, whether that's extruded or cold pressed. So there's some of my thoughts on the matter. If you've any specific questions, or you've any issues, like you've been trying loads of different dog foods and you still can't find the right thing for your dog, or they have an allergy that you can't figure out, please get in touch. Let me see if myself or one of the other guys here can help you figure out what's going on. We've got free samples of the food, so you can do taste tests with them beforehand. And we love to help. We're here to help. If we can't apply our, many years of knowledge in figuring these things out, it would be a real shame. We really are here to help. So give us a call, send us an email, fill out the form on the website, get in touch with any of your questions, and one of us will be more than happy to help. Thanks so much.